Okay, so what I want to do now is to add the list of scores. Let's see how we can do this part, how we can add the list of scores to the page. So the first thing we need to do is to add a div onto the page. So if we go to our HTML, we go to flashcards, I'm going to add it before the tracker. Okay, so we're allowed to put comments in. Okay, so I keep trying to encourage you to put comments in. So we can put HTML comments in as well. So let's just make it clear. So when we read our code, we can see what we're doing. Okay, please notice the indentations. Please notice the spacing. So this I'm going to have here for last 5 scores. Okay, and this, it's the contents will be dynamically created. Okay, so I'm going to call that div scores, okay, because that's where it's going to go. Okay, so let's save that. So that's going to go above. Okay, so it's going to go, if I do next term, it's going to sit above the card. Okay, and that's where I want it to go. So there's my div. I've got a div now that I can talk to. It's got an ID of scores. So in my JavaScript, I can use hash scores. Okay, so now when we are looking at the pseudocode for this, so we need to go through, we've got a list here. Now there might not be 5 scores in there. So that's what we've got to be careful of. So we need to have a counter. So the counter has got to go to either to 5 and stop at 5, or it's got to stop when it gets to the end of the list. Okay, so we need to know how many items are in the list. Get how many items are in the list. Okay, so how many scores? Okay, so number of scores. Okay, and we know with the list we can just say scores dot length, and that will count for us how many items there are in there. So that tells us that. So we need a while loop. I'm not sure we've done a while loop in JavaScript, but it works exactly the same. We've got while, then a condition, and then we've got a loop. Okay, and we're going to be putting some stuff into there. So just to show you, just make sure we can show you. So if we go to JavaScript, W3 schools, we can go to JavaScript and we can look at loops. Okay, so it's got JS4, 4 in, 4 of, and JS loop while. Okay, so while loop works in the same way as we've used it in Python. The condition, like in the ifs, it goes in the brackets, and we put the condition in the loop, and then we have the curly brackets. Okay, so that's there. Again, I'm just looking up the reference just to be sure. Okay, so we can do that. So our condition has got to be, well, we have some sort of counter, and that counter's got to be less than the number of scores. Okay, well, we'll do that one in a minute. And what also has got to be true? And the counter is less than 5. So what we're going to do here, so the counter has got to be less than 5, or it's an or, isn't it? Or go into it if the counter is less than number of scores, or the counter is less than 5. Okay, so if the number of scores was 3, okay, then if the counter, once the counter gets to 3, we don't want it to go into the loop. Okay, so we don't want it to carry on. So let's think of the logic of what we're saying here. So let's, we want to set our counter to 0 to start with. Okay, and then the logic of what we're doing, somewhere in here, we're going to have to make counter plus equals 1. Okay, so we're adding 1 to the counter as we go around. So let's just check our logic of what we're doing. So we want to go into the loop if counter is less than number of scores, okay, and counter is less than 5. So there shouldn't be an or, should it? Both of these things have got to be true. So we put an and in. So in JavaScript, and is a double ampersand. So the ampersand is the and symbol. Okay, so if the counter is less than the number of scores, so that's the length. Okay, so we're starting off with 0, remember, and the counter is also less than 5. So if the counter goes above 5, we'll stop. If the counter goes above number of scores, then we'll stop. Okay, so what do we need to do here? So we need to build a paragraph. Okay, so we've said in the pseudocode it's going to be called score and date. That's going to be a paragraph, a new paragraph. Okay, so there's my new paragraph. So make a paragraph. For the score. Okay. So now we've got a list called scores. Okay, so we should be able to get the data from the scores. So we just want to add into that. We want to make a string that's going to sit in there. So let's make a string for the date and for the score, date and time. Okay, so what should we call it? Should we call it constant date to print?
30 seconds for me to ask you a question. I'll change.
Okay, constant data print, let's call it, and it's going to be a string, and we're going to say, well, how should we say it? Score. Okay, and then we want to add the score. So the score should come from the scores list, and we should be able to use counter because that's where, it's a list, and that's the index of it, the first one. Okay, dot, and then we want to take the score. Remember, it's a JSON object. Okay, it's a JSON object, and we want the score. So that will build the score part of it. And then we want to add to that the date and the time. Plus, so space, date, and we want to say the date and the time, right? So plus scores, square brackets, counter, dot date. Okay, so we built a date JSON object to put into. So if you remember, we have built a JSON object here, which is made up of score and date. Okay, so if we access this object, it'll have score and it'll have date. So we'll have those things there. Okay, so we go back here. That's doing that. That will build the string. It might not look exactly how we want it. Okay, now, and then we just have to add the string to the paragraph. So we'll say score and date in dot append like we've already done, and we add in date to print. Right, like we've done that before when we've added the paragraphs, and then we need to put the paragraph in the div for scores. Okay, and div for scores is $hash scores, which is what we've said. So we're going to say dot append because we're going to add 5 things to it, hopefully. We're going to append score and date, which is a paragraph. Okay, and then we're going to make it do counter plus 1. Now, the only problem we've got here is we want to do the last 5. Okay, so at the moment it does the first 5 because we start at 0. Okay, and it does the first 5. So we need to make sure that this, okay, points to the correct one. So if we make calculate index, okay, we could do this all in one, but it's probably easier to do that. Okay, so what do we want the index to be? So if we want the very last one, it should be the first time round, it should be the number of scores minus 1. Okay, remember, number of scores is the length. Okay, so const number of scores is the length of the list. So we start at 0 and we're 0 counting. So that the last one should be, the index should be number of scores minus 1. But then we also want to make sure we take in 5. So each time, if we add or take away the counter, so the first time the counter is 0, so that will just be the last one. Next time the counter's 1, so it should be the last but 1, and so on. Okay, so that will do our, we will count it all down. So in here, I'm just going to put index, and in there, I'll put index. Okay, so that should now build me what I need and put it in there. Now, this is also what we need when we load up the page. Okay, so, oh, sorry, this is what we load up the page, but this is also what we need when we're on the button and we're processing the data to go onto where we're updating the score after we've done the after we've done the first round. We wanted to update the page again, so we'll have a new score to go in there. Okay, so that's the score. That's the same code that needs to go into there as well, because basically we're going to do the same thing. Okay, so when we click on BTN here, this bit here, that bit there, so we've got exactly the same code. So I'm going to take that code, so there, copy that, and I'm going to put it into buttons, and here we append it back. So instead of that, update the last scores on the page, so that should all look the same. Okay, so we get how many items are in the list, so that, okay, we've already got scores here, so that does that. We've got a counter, and we still update the thing. So we just need to clear out the div. Okay, so we need to clear the div this time, clear the scores div, and we just need to say $hash scores .html, it's blank, and that will clear the scores div, and then that will update it. Okay, so we'll add the last 5 onto there. Okay, so that's how you would do that part of it. Okay, make sure you watch this back and you listen to it carefully, and that you're able to do this.